Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards in the board game Dominion. Today we are looking at Cutpurse. This is a 4-cost action and attack card from Seaside, and it says +2 coins. Each other player discards a copper or reveals a hand with no copper. This card is very different based on the number of players, so as usual with these videos, I'm going to be focusing mainly on 2-player strategy, but there will be a section at the end where I talk about what Cutpurse is like as you add more players. So your first impressions when you look at Cutpurse are probably, this sounds a lot like Militia. So Militia in the base game, it's a terminal, it's a stop card, it costs 4, it gives you 2 coins, it performs a discard attack on your opponent. Right, the vast majority of this card is very, very similar to Militia. The only thing that is different is the nature of the discard attack. Now, in practice, there are some situations in which Cutpurse does feel very similar to Militia, but it is wildly different in other situations. So the discard attack, it only discards 1 card per play at most. However, it is stackable. There is no limit. If someone theoretically had a hand of 5 coppers and somehow they had 5 Cutpurses played against them, they would actually have no cards left in their hand. Because the problem with Cutpurse, it only discards coppers. If they don't have any coppers in their hand between turns, then the attack basically does nothing at all. Yes, it does reveal their hand, but that's basically useless the vast majority of the time. I mean, maybe they have patrons in their hand and they get coffers because they revealed the patron, but for the most part, you can consider revealing their hand to basically do nothing, right? Like, it's not, you can't usually actually do anything with that information, is why it's basically irrelevant. So if the attack does miss, then what you've got is a terminal silver. You spend an action, you get 2 coins, and that's pretty poor, usually, for spending an action. Now, there are reasons why you might want a card just to be a terminal silver. I have talked about those in the Militia video. It's probably worth watching the Militia video anyway, if you're watching this one and you haven't already, just because it helps you understand the differences, really, between Cutpurse and Militia, and sort of understand as well why they're similar. Like, we're going to be making some references to Militia in this video. So at the very start of the game, your opponent should have a deck that is mostly copper. It's usually going to have 7, maybe they've got some heirlooms, but for the most part, it's very, very rare to see a game where they don't have the majority of their deck be copper. So that means it's very, very likely that they're going to have copper in their hand. In addition to that, you usually, not always, but in a bunch of kingdoms, you want to try and get to 5 early, because that's where like the best cards are, or like 6. And because most of your economy, if not all of it, is coming from copper, that means that Cutpurse can actually do something meaningful here. This is the ideal situation for Cutpurse. Players are likely to have coppers in their hand, and they need to use them to hit some key price point. So when you actually discard just 1 copper, that stops them buying the card that they want. Now, this is sort of similar to what happens with Militia in the early game as well. Of course, with Militia, they might be able to discard 1 estate, possibly even 2 estates, but generally they're not going to be hitting 5 on the Militia turn unless they get very, very lucky, right? So it has that similar impact, stops them from hitting the most important price point. If that's a thing that you want to do, then that's where Cutpurse is going to be good in the early game, and that's why you would open Cutpurse. You'd buy it because you want to stop your opponent from hitting 5 on like turns 3 and 4. So to generalise this, Cutpurse attack, it's only effective when your opponent is actually reliant on coppers, either because they need to actually play them for money, or usually because they're discarding the copper. So they might have a card like Stables that wants to discard coppers to draw. They might have like Hamlet and Inn, which are ways to like get a village effect while also discarding cards. And sometimes you're going to be using coppers for that. You would rather have some coppers around to discard. Like, if your opponent isn't going to spend all of the money that they could generate, like they're sort of slightly over-generating money, then discarding a single copper out of their hand might not be doing anything because they weren't really going to be spending that one coin anyway. So there are some kingdoms where the players are going to be using coppers as their main source of money for a while. So it could be, for example, you've got a strategy that's like Gardens or Duke where you can't build an engine, trashing will be very slow, or you don't want to do it at all in like a Gardens and a Duke style deck. The draw might be fairly weak, so you don't really want to be throwing in like silvers and stuff, or like not present at all, and so you're a little bit more reliant on copper than you would. In addition to that, there can be landmarks from the Empire's expansion that encourage the player to keep coppers around. So Fountain's the obvious one, where you get 15 points if you have 10 coppers in your deck at the end of the game. Keep, that gives you bonus points for having the most of a certain type of treasure. Palace, that gives you points for every set of copper, silver and gold you have. Right, so copper isn't... Sometimes you actually do want them, and when you are reliant on it, that is the situation where Cutpurse is going to actually meaningfully do something throughout the game. Of course, in most games, you want to trash your coppers. They're weak stop cards. They get in the way of building a functional engine. If you've been watching all the videos so far, you should really understand this point by now. Right, coppers, they're very weak. You want to get rid of them. Once the coppers are mostly gone, or completely gone, Cutpurse's attack becomes very likely to miss, or guaranteed, right? So this means that in most boards where you're looking to try and get rid of all of your coppers, the fact is that Cutpurse just stops hitting your opponent, the attack, right? It loses relevance fairly quickly. So if you've been noticing this in your games and you were coming to this video to see, like, am I doing something wrong with Cutpurse? It just sort of stops being good. You're not. This is just the nature of Cutpurse, right? It just stops having relevance a lot of the time outside of the early game. So because it usually doesn't have much value outside of the early game, it's usually very unlikely that you would ever buy more than one to try and like discard multiple coppers and stack the attack. It's just not worth it a lot of the time. It's very difficult to actually get that to work, because by the time it's a good idea to maybe consider a second Cutpurse, all the coppers have gone, so there's no point. Now, because this is an attack that loses relevance, it can be a nice target for various cost-relevant trashers like Remodel or Salvager. You can buy it early on just to slow down your opponent and then get rid of it when it's lost its usage. So that can boost the value of certain trash cards in the kingdom. Like, make it more reasonable to pick up the Cutpurse, even if it's only going to have effect in like the first 2 or 3 times you play it. Now, there are attacks out there that can junk your opponent with coppers. Ambassador is one, Mountebank in Prosperity is another, Jester is another one that can technically like throw coppers your opponent's way. There are some more, but these are like the ones that are probably most likely going to give your opponent coppers. Now, you might think to yourself, does this make Cutpurse better if my opponent is junked with more coppers? And, it does make Cutpurse more likely to hit. But the fact is that if the junking is strong enough, you would rather be spending that terminal action on junking your opponent more. That's going to be more valuable than a single Cutpurse hit. So if it is a board where it's possible to junk your opponent a lot, then you've got to expect that that's going to be happening to you as well. So you're probably not going to be able to get off a decent engine that can play a Cutpurse every turn, and so you really would be better off just throwing like more junking cards in. You've only got so many action cards you can play, and you don't really want like collisions if it's hard to build an engine in particular, so maybe Cutpurse isn't as good as you might initially think in those kind of situations. Now it's time to do some more direct comparisons with Militia. So Militia is a much, much stronger attack than Cutpurse. It has more relevance throughout the length of the game. Like Militia doesn't really stop being relevant at any point in the way that Cutpurse does. Militia also has synergies with Council Room and stops these events that let players start with a bigger hand, like save an expedition. So Militia does more than Cutpurse, right? It has effects where the discard is actually even more powerful. Generally, if you had a choice between Militia and Cutpurse, you'd basically always take the Militia. It's a much stronger card. For reference, in the latest community rankings, like Militia is a top 25% card, while Cutpurse is in the bottom 20%. So that's a massive difference between these two cards. Right, just give you some idea of just how much better Militia is. But at the very beginning of the game, Cutpurse is roughly as strong as Militia in terms of what it does, right? A Militia attack is usually going to result in the player having to discard at least 1 copper, and so Cutpurse has a very similar feeling effect, basically. So let's talk about Cutpurse when we add more players. So this is a stackable attack, and like all stackable attacks, when you add more opponents, the attack part gets stronger. In fact, Cutpurse can be absolutely brutal as you add more and more players at the opening of the game. If multiple players open with it, then it's very likely that someone, particularly players that go later in the turn order, they're going to get multi-attacked on their early turns. So a bit like Militia, Cutpurse has the same sort of effect where the players earlier in the turn order sort of get an advantage. They get to basically take their turn 3 and possibly turn 4 with no risk of being attacked, while the poor 4th player in a 4-player game is almost certainly going to get walloped on turn 3 and then probably again on turn 4, so they just have a much worse time. And in fact, Cutpurse can be real bad in this respect. Like, sometimes you just get hit 2 or 3 times and your entire turn is dead. And the early turns of the game are very important because these are where you gain the cards that are going to be played the most and have the largest impact on your deck. So just having to skip turn 3 is really bad, or only getting a 2-cost card or something instead of a 4-cost or whatever. That can be terrible for your deck, basically. Unfortunately, there's not really very much you can do about this. You just get wrecked. What can you do to stop losing your hand on turn 3 against Cutpurse? And the reality is most of the time nothing at all, right? In multiplayer, Cutpurse will just randomly stomp on someone, and tough, basically. So because it's more important and it can cause you just constantly lose economy, it is important to try and focus on removing the coppers and finding other sources of income if you can. Of course, you might not be able to buy them because you'll keep getting Cutpursed, but that's just, how it goes, I'm afraid. More players there are, in general, the harder it is to build an engine. There are less cards to go around per player, and also as you get to 4 players, there's actually less provinces per player as well. This means that strategies that trash less and look to gun for lucky early provinces by getting sudden big spikes of money, like playing a terminal draw card, they tend to be a bit better on. So what that means is that coppers are probably more likely to stick around in a multiplayer game, and that helps Cutpurse as well. Now, if you want Cutpurse to be really good in multiplayer, you are sort of reliant on other players joining in so that you can all gang up on player 4 or whatever. If there are other better 4 costs, then that means that other players might go for them rather than join in. And in a way, that actually makes your own Cutpurse slightly less impactful. So Cutpurse, you utterly destroy other players, but only if other people are joining in as well. So while it doesn't strictly make your own Cutpurses stronger, the Cutpurses in general have more of an impact, and they slow down your opponent more if multiple people join in. So it could be that there's something like Cutpurse seems really good, but there's also Baron, and a player decides, I need an alternate source of money. If I'm losing all my coppers, then I'm going to discard estates with Baron and at least guarantee hitting 4 or possibly 5. And that's a situation where someone else, like Morsa, might think that, and then suddenly no one's really joining you on your Cutpurse game, and Cutpurse is actually worse as a result. So that sort of thing can happen. But yeah, in general, Cutpurse is just actually decent on some boards in multiplayer, just by the nature of the fact that someone is going to get destroyed and you just sort of hope it's not you. It's not necessarily, if I may drop the strategy advice and go to personal opinion for a second, it's not that great design really for like 4 players. I don't really like the card that much. It's just like someone just feels bad basically as they just get destroyed and they can't do anything about it. So I don't really like the card. I think it could do better, right? There's much better cards out there that you could be playing with instead, I guess. Right. So that's Cutpurse. So what we're going to do now is we're going to head over to the online client and we're going to generate some random kingdoms with Cutpurse in it. And we are going to see what impact it has. In this kingdom here, we have Moneylender and Ambassador to get thin. And we have throne rooms, we have shanty towns as villages, we've got smithy and patrol as draw. There is no plus buy. We do have merchant, but like there's no way to gain cards, so we'd probably be buying like expensive treasures. We have got an engine. We can get thin. Ambassador's really good to open here. I don't think Cutpurse is relevant at all. Like we actually don't really care to hit 5 because they're smithy. There's only one 5 cost card and it's patrol. So like opening Ambassador is fine. We might even get a haven. Like if we get a 2 turn, like it's fine here probably. It's not a very exciting board. But we want to just get thin. We want to grab some silvers, golds. We can only get best to 8 per turn, and we just want to try and get a deck that's fairly consistent at doing that. Merchant is fine. We'll get a silver and then maybe some merchants. Like the silver's not at risk of getting stolen. And how do we build the engine exactly? Is it just like Shantytown with smithy? That's not great. Throne rooms, we can have a few in there. We can throne merchants, right? We can... and then play smithy, maybe throne smithy now and then. I think Cutpurse is irrelevant here. There's just no good time to get it. You don't really care when you're thinning early on if Cutpurse hits your turn when you've got like Ambassador in your hand, because you probably weren't really buying anything anyway, or the only thing you miss out on is a haven, and well, who cares about that? And you want plenty of merchants at 3, and the highest you can ever get to is 4 anyway, so none of that really matters. So yeah, so Cutpurse is entirely irrelevant on this kingdom. You just don't need it for its attack, and there's no room for it in your deck, really. In this next kingdom, we have Ambassador again, and we have Mining Village, and we have, that's as a village, we have Council Room to draw, and that is like the only draw, right? Yes, it is. There is Pirate Ship as well, but we've got Ambassador to get thin, so we don't really care. Now, what are we going to do for money here? So it looks like we've got thin very quickly. We've got Mining Village, Council Room. We could see hag our opponent, but because there's Ambassador, I do wonder if there's any point to it. If your opponent can get thin, then sea hag is just sort of a waste of time in your deck. I think I'm going to open Ambassador. What else do I open with? I guess it's going to have to be a silver, right? I think I just simply have a draw engine with a small number of treasures, and Pirate Ship isn't worth it. I can get to a state where there's so few treasures in my deck that Pirate Ship is likely to miss, and I can probably easily get redundancy. I'm going to have plenty of buys because I'm using Council Room to buy. Now, if I draw with Council Room, that is giving my opponent better hands, but I don't think I care. I think it is fine to have my opponent come along for the ride. Like sometimes Council Room, you just have 2 players playing it and they just help each other, and I think this is one of those kingdoms. You might get a warehouse at some point. I think it is just a simple draw engine where you're just going to be playing Ambassador tennis for a while. And again, Cutpurse doesn't really matter there. I don't think you're actually in a huge rush to buy Council Room. You do want to get thin first and focus on that. So it's going to be an Ambassador thing for a while, and then we start clawing our way up to Mining Village and Council Room. And Pirate Ship doesn't really matter here, and Cutpurse doesn't really matter. It's very unlikely to hit pretty soon, or it's irrelevant. So yeah, we there's only one village pile. There's good draw, but we don't want too many other terminals. In fact, the only terminal we're looking to play really are like Ambassador and Council Room, I guess. So it's just a standard engine following an ambassador thing, and I don't think Cutpurse is any good here. I don't think the attack matters. So never mind for Cutpurse. Here we have Trashing with Moneylender. We have Wharf and Lab and Wishing Well as draw. We have Shantytown as our only village. I guess we've technically got Island for trashing as well. We want to open Moneylender, given that it's our only trasher. Maybe we get islands later to get rid of the estates. We have got Artisan to help us do that. But what we really want to be doing is Shantytown and Wharf as a big draw engine. Maybe we get some labs as well. And what are we going to do for money at that point? We're going to have a load of buys with Wharf, so we can just buy some silvers and golds, I guess. Is probably going to be the best thing that we do. Does Cutpurse matter? So in the early game, we would rather buy Moneylender, and then we start thinning coppers. And I'm going to open Moneylender, and I think I have to open silver. I don't want Moneylender to collide with Shantytown. I guess I could do, Wishing Well and Moneylender seems like a reasonably okay opening, I think. And we should be able to hit 5. I'm not worried about a Cutpurse. It's just going to lose relevance, and the village is pretty bad. I would much rather be spending my Shantytowns on Wharves, Artisans, Moneylender, maybe some islands. I don't think I have the spare terminal space for Cutpurse, so I don't like it here either. I don't think the opening attack is all that useful. There's better things to do. It's going to lose relevance. And the only way to get rid of it when it's lost relevance is islanding it away, which also kind of stinks. So I think I ignore Cutpurse here as well. So that's 0 out of 3 for Cutpurse at the moment, but it is a fairly weak card in 2-player, so that's fine. Here we have no trashing, but we do have Native Village as what we call pseudo-trashing. So it can just store all of our junk cards, possibly. And we can try and help set that up with a single vassal, but this seems very potentially expensive for villages, is it? So what are we going to do? We've got Workshop with a village and smithy, so that seems very good. So we'd like to do that. Smugglers doesn't seem as good as Workshop, because sure, it can get you gold, but how many of these things are you going to get? I don't think we care. We only care about Courtier, and we might get one at some point. But Courtier, interesting. Cutpurse is the only card that has more than one type for Courtier. Is that relevant? Might we gain a Cutpurse just to get an extra effect from Courtier? I don't know if that's worth it. I think that depends on how well villages go. So we do have 2 village piles, but honestly, I would like Native Village to only have 1 and use it to try and thin my deck, and I can use a single vassal or some vassals to help with that. Vassal is a fine card to gain here. Mining Village, Smithy, Vassal, get thinning my deck with Native Village. That seems like a decent thing. I just have to watch out for hitting Native Village with a vassal. I might actually choose to not play it when it's just got all my junk stored on the Native Village map. That seems like a decent thing to do here. I can get a lot of money fairly quickly with Workshop. There's Village, there's Smithy. Just gain a bunch of villages. Village pile seems important here. So I think I open Workshop, and so I could open Cutpurse, but does it matter? I don't think it does. I have stuff that I can buy at 2, 3, and 4. I don't really care to hit 5 for a while. When I can hit 5 to get a buy, I'll probably have some vassals, and I've drawn with Smithy. There will be a time to buy it, and I only want 1. So Cutpurse again is no good here because there's just good cheap cards, and with stuff like Workshop as well. So I'm going to try and gain a bunch of action density, really, and thin very slowly, but I should still be able to have decent turns. Maybe I don't bother gunning for double province. Maybe you don't bother with Courtier at all, but it seems a waste if you get 6 or 7. It would be nice to have a buy and buy multiple cheaper cards. We might even have a 3-pile thing going on. Mining Village and Vassal are probably going to run out, so maybe there's a way to actually drop some other pile quickly. But man, 0 out of 4 for Cutpurse so far. It's quite surprising. Normally you'd get a kingdom that actually has like a good 5 that's important, but we just haven't seen it. Is this kingdom going to change? So we have no trashing at all. We do have nobles and library and diplomat as draw. We do have throne room and shantytown as villages. We've got ironworks to pick up throne rooms, diplomats and shantytowns. That seems pretty good. Throne room diplomat seems nice. And we got warehouse, so we can't trash, but warehouse seems like it might be decent. Now, interestingly, because Cutpurse actually helps diplomat player, it's an attack, so they get to do their reaction, and then potentially it drops like the hand size down. That might actually be relevant for the diplomat player. And given that I think I want to open ironworks and start gaining like diplomats and shantytowns and warehouses, I'm probably going to open ironworks warehouse. I'm going to look to start gaining diplomats, and with like warehouse as well, I can get the value from diplomat. And then eventually I think I just want to buy nobles. Now, I know there's no plus buy here, so my deck only wants to be so good, and I think nobles might be all right in that case to have some, just because they're points. Maybe I can get harems when I actually want money as well, again, just because it's points. Is embargo good? What would I do if I actually ended up with an embargo somehow? The problem is ironworks blocks a lot of stuff, so I would probably embargo, like, maybe I'd just shut down nobles. Like, if my opponent isn't going quite so heavy on getting these 4-cost cards, I'd probably just embargo nobles. Otherwise, anything I embargo is probably going to hurt me as well. So embargo doesn't seem very good. Here, you definitely want to open ironworks. Even if you get a 5-2 split, you still pick up an ironworks, I think. So Cutpurse, the attack, actually, the coppers stick around and it can discard, but this just so happens to be a board where your player actually wants you to attack them and discard your hand, which means that Cutpurse is no good here. We're actually helping your opponent by Cutpursing them, so don't do it. So that was 0 out of 5 for Cutpurse, which is not quite what I expected. I thought there would at least be one kingdom where Cutpurse was good, but here it seemed like it was bad in all of them. So Cutpurse, it is just a fairly weak card. It is Militia, but worse in a lot of situations. So, yeah, that's sad for Cutpurse, but, they're not all the strongest card around. So it's a lot more niche. Anyway, I hope that was useful for you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.